From airing stories yanked right out of reality for over 20 years, to sticking to its tired formula of investigating and putting away bad guys. This is why Law & Order SVU is the worst crime show ever. It's got skin in the game, because it's a certified TV staple. Well, to be more accurate, Law & Order was. But SVU was its first spin-off, and you know how much TV loves those, right? It was created by Dick Wolf's production company and starred Christopher Maloney as Detective Elliot Stabler, until he left the show in 2011. Mariska Hargitay acted opposite him as Detective Olivia Benson, and later became the commanding officer of the unit. Now, the series followed the style of the original, and some of its episodes were modeled on cases from the real world that had gotten widespread media attention. It premiered on September 20th, 1999, and became the longest-running primetime US live-action series in TV's history in September 2019. As of May 2023, the show had aired 538 original episodes. The procedural's based out of NYPD's 16th Precinct in Manhattan, and it takes a deep dive into the dark side of crime, as the show's detectives investigate sexually oriented offenses and help victims who require special handling. For a show that's been around long enough to go down in history, you'd think that it'd have the chops to remain relevant, right? Well, nothing lasts too long, and the show's writing is feeling the burnout. When a series sticks around very long, it comes with repetition. 'Cause some things become a part of its permanent structure. Law & Order SVU runs like a well-oiled machine, except machines don't give the world great writing. The best scripts have a human touch to them, but this show's scripts seem to be auto-written by a program that's been fed its format. Some people think that way back in 2010, the series had maxed out on creativity. Also, the stories it takes from reality never quite hit the mark. Many fans have complained that the twists of the past seasons have disappeared. The older cases had a unique effect. They concluded the case, but were complex enough to leave the viewer thinking about it all for a while, because it wasn't black and white. A Reddit user posted that they liked it better when the justice didn't feel like justice, and there was a conflict in the story, much like the real world. But that's another thing. The show's never been much like the real world at all. Even when it first started, it had its fair share of problems. Mariska was still finding her footing as an actor, and the overall tone of the series was off. It was meant to be about sex crimes, but obviously a show with that in its title wasn't going to get far. The writers didn't seem all that sold on the plot themselves, because they took all the chances they had to keep away from the concept. Do you remember all those mistaken sexual violence cases that turned out to be something else entirely? Like the assault-homicide investigations would often lead to something like stolen diamonds. Also, with SVU, it's never the first suspect. So at some point it became all about throwing off the viewer. The whole plot zigzagged its way through so much to just end up at a non-sex crime story. Plus, when they did get into cases that were real SVU business, it'd be a whole next level of disturbing, because the show had told you to expect that. You can't take away credit from the showrunner, and they tried to change that format and brought in Warren Leight, a playwright and the head writer behind projects such as HBO's In Treatment. Now, even though that was an improvement, the ripped from reality thing did the show no favors. The new creative direction led to some replacements and a tone shift. Warren was pretty open about how SVU had gone off the tracks, and his goal was to take it back to its roots and get into the type of cases that the special unit had to deal with in reality. The new approach didn't solve all the problems, because Warren couldn't make the shift to the uncomfortable side of things successfully. One thing remained the same though. The stories were still from reality. And it's this concept that's been the hardest on the franchise. You see, the show wasn't able to tell interesting stories about reality. There was that Rihanna and Chris Brown episode, which didn't end like the original story, but became a cautionary tale. Also, there was the episode where a character was repeatedly threatened, but she turned down police protection. Not only was she kidnapped, but she was also brutally assaulted. Real women live with threats like that all their lives, and it isn't something of the past that can be brought up and made into a story. It comes off as mean because they just had to put in assault to make it a part of the show, It was inappropriate, and Twitter called out the showrunners for it. It's episodes like this that make you feel that maybe Law & Order SVU would have been better as a limited time series. Other shows take the same format and make it work, but SVU lacks in the character department too. Shows like House did just fine with the same format because the writing kept them afloat. With SVU, the bad writing got to the characters too. Another user on Reddit shared that the writing was terrible in the 24th season. All the characters were weird and behaving like they normally wouldn't. Everyone was cynical and sarcastic all the time, and the legal consultant was just off the scene. The user added that the dialogue was falling flat and was bizarre. They weren't the only ones who felt this way, and many others added that they'd noticed the change too. Another said that with the familiar characters being written off, and with new ones trying to float in the already loved show, some episodes were very graphic and they felt like the show was completely different. Another user shared that Wolf was trying to maximize profits. The forensic psychiatrist and the ME were cut, even though they were important for the plot's development. The familiar faces of defense attorneys and judges were absent too. Another fan said that the characters weren't the problem. Instead, it was Olivia Benson. Her hypocrisy and attitude were hard to watch, considering how she'd been on the wrong side of the law so many times. The new morality as the captain didn't suit her, and with the lead character so flawed, it was hard to get into the show. To have such characters tackling real-life problems was sort of disturbing. With the issue of police brutality being in the headlines, those problems of course made their way into SVU's plot too. Like in the season 22 premiere, Benson was accused of being racially biased because she arrested a black man for assault, and the guy turned out to be innocent. In the same season, police malpractice got in the way of one of the squad's cases. In the past, when the show picked headlines from reality, it was all right. But with the changing times, it was hard to watch one of those tales from a perspective that glorifies the police. Some people thought that it wasn't right to see officers as the good guys with all the race-related issues. It makes sense, because such shows just get in the way of reform, and the dedicated detectives might have a place in the world. But the community does too, and their stories needed to be seen as well. But then again, that isn't the only thing the show gets wrong about the police. There are multiple inaccuracies in the procedural, like using arrest as a threat. The detectives would often pull out their handcuffs to make someone talk. It usually got them quick confessions, but in reality, it's never that simple. Those are considered forced confessions, and smartphones have made them less common. Also, there were incredibly rare road trips. The judge can allow officers to investigate outside their jurisdiction, but mostly those cases go to the FBI. Another frustrating thing was how quickly trials happen in the show. They mostly wrap up in about a week or so, when usually they can take months or even years. Sometimes the juries alone take weeks to reach a conviction. At the end of the day, SVU never really changes. It's a trusted formula. There's violence, the result of that violence, an investigation, and an arrest. Then the action picks up after the interrogation, with a plot twist until the squad finds the real criminal. Sure, the show moves away from it here or there, but you can count on it to come right back. It might be horrifying and violent, but there's a familiarity and it keeps the fans hooked. But with the changing times, something's gotta give. 'Cause if you want to watch a great crime show, this ain't it. So, from sticking to its tired formula of investigating and putting away bad guys, to airing stories yanked right out of reality for over 20 years, this was why Law & Order SVU is the worst crime show ever.